Hello everyone. So today we're going to be debunking the myth that the CIA caused a crack epidemic in America's inner cities. I'm Izzy.
I'm Serena.
I'm Isa.
And I'm Chloe.
First, we're going to have Serena talk about the historical context of the conspiracy claim.
Several writers have alleged that the United States Central Intelligence Agency, also known as the CIA, was involved in the Nicaraguan Contras cocaine trafficking operations during the 1980s. The Nicaraguan Civil War was an effort to finance the Contra group that was trying to topple the revolutionary Sandinista government. The crack epidemic spread throughout the USA from 1970 to the 1990s. Addiction rates inflated drastically. There was urban decay and there was lethal effects for colored communities in America at the time. For background understanding, the CIA was formed in 1947 under Harry Truman. Since its creation, the CIA has been linked to many outlandish operations. Some have been proven correct, for example, the LSD mind control experiments in the 1950s. In 1996, the CIA had been linked to a new operation which happened to be the devastating crack epidemic. The CIA were accused of being drug dealers during the epidemic. A news reporter, Gary Webb, told stories of there being a drug triangle during the 1980s which had to do with members of the CIA. He believed Central America, a San Francisco drug ring, and a Los Angeles drug dealer were part of this triangle. Based on his claims, a few members of the CIA sold crack to a Los Angeles African American community. Gary Webb's stories in the San Jose Mercury News claimed that those deals were meant to bring in millions of dollars to hold up the CIA's extreme operations in Central America. Webb's stories had extreme traction, and the news spread to radio and African American leaders such as Maxine Waters, a previous U.S. representative. She proclaimed Webb's articles acted as corroboration that the plan was to destroy inner-city Black America. A retired veteran DEA agent, Robert Nieves, said, quote, "You have to understand Central America at that time. It was a haven for the conspiracy theorists. Christic Institute, people like Gary Webb and others down there, are looking up to dig up some story for political advantage." Nieves was accusing Webb of spreading a conspiracy theory. Even though Nieves accused Webb of spreading disinformation, there were severe disparities between the Black communities and the white communities and how they were affected by the epidemic. The USSC released a report to Congress around 1995 stating that 80% of crack offenders were Black and led to vicious sentences creating extreme racial divergence. It was unfair and the criminal justice system was unequitable. A case study done by the Columbia Journalism Review showed how a story about drug trafficking by the Sandinista government had gained intense and enormous media attention with help from the Reagan administration. The Nicaraguan drug reports were barely mentioned in the news. On July 17, 1984, the Mooney paper connected members of the Marxist government in Nicaragua to drug trafficking. The reports were only matched to a source in the Reagan administration, and it was connected to Federico Vaughn. He was a convicted drug dealer and apparently shared information with the U.S. government. The paper said that Vaughn went to court and subtly implied that members of the Nicaraguan government were involved, in fact, with drug smuggling and taking those drugs from Colombia all the way to the USA. According to the National Security Archive, there are declassified documents that had notebooks held by the NSC aide and Iran-Contra figure Oliver North. Messages were written by Reagan administration officials that had to do with the Contra war effort. The documents prove that there was awareness about drug operations and could have meant there was collaboration with drug traffickers. A Freedom Information Act lawsuit was filed in 1989. These documents imply that Oliver North was involved with shady operations and could get away with it because the lawsuit was put through.
The content of this conspiracy claim is threefold. Like Serena said, a number of writers allege that the CIA was involved in the Nicaraguan Contras cocaine trafficking operations during the 1980s. These claims led to investigations by the United States government, including hearings and reports by the United States House of Representatives, the Senate, the Justice Department, and the CIA's Office of Inspector General. but it ultimately concluded these allegations were unsupported, though the subject still remains controversial. The 1986 investigation by a subcommittee of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee found that the Contra drug links included, among other connections, payments to drug traffickers by the U.S. State Department, in some cases after the traffickers had been indicted by federal law enforcement agencies on drug charges. In others, drug traffickers were under active investigation by the same agencies. The charges of the CIA involvement in Contra cocaine trafficking were revived in 1996 when a newspaper series by reporter Gary Webb in the San Jose Mercury News claimed that the trafficking had played an important role in the creation of the crack cocaine drug problem in the USA. Webb series led to 3 federal investigations, all of which concluded there was no evidence of a conspiracy by the CIA officials or its employees to bring drugs into the U.S. The Los Angeles Times, the New York Times, and the Washington Post launched their own investigations and rejected Webb's allegations. However, an internal report issued by the CIA would admit that the agency was aware of the Contra involvement in drug trafficking and in some cases dissuaded the DEA and other agencies from investigating the Contra supply network involved.
In my investigation, I found a journalist named Gary Webb. He did an article called Dark Alliance. In this article, he claimed that the CIA helped bring drugs into a black neighborhood. He made a deep investigation where he discovered 2 narcotic traffickers in Nicaragua who were Danilo Blando and Norway Menezes working for the CIA. Besides, there was a distributor who converted the cocaine into crack in cheaper way who was Freeway Ricky Road. The CIA was helping them because they need the money to finance a group also called Contra, fighting in Nicaragua. For this reason, the CIA never tried to do anything to stop drug trafficking group even though they had information about it. It was as if the CIA were trying to try to protect them. Due to the sale of crack, they got a lot of money, so many gang members were able to get weapons and this generated more violence. In the end, Rhodes ended up in the prison, but Blando did not go to the prison, even though he was the drug kingpin. The DEA protected him since he was supposedly an informant. When Gary Webb published all this information in his Dark Alliance article, the CIA and mainstream media launched a full-scale attack against him. The CIA even held a press conference especially to smear Webb. That all mainstream media turned against Gary was kind of surprising as they did not do any investigation if Webb article is real or fake. They just attacked Gary as if the CIA had been plotting against him. Years later, the classification CIA document proved Gary Webb had been right all along. In the end, Gary was found dead. According to the police, supposedly Gary died of a suicide. Webb was found dead with 2 bullet wounds in his head, but I don't think a person can shoot himself twice. This death led many people to believe that the CIA was the cause of the epidemic and overprotected the narco sign. Danilo Blando and Norway Menezes were never prosecuted, and they also believed that the Gary was silent. There were also reports where the agents report on narco in Contra, but they were never taken seriously. Blando's testimony where he talked about how the CIA never stopped him and that the CIA support the sale of crack cocaine.
Based on Gary Webb's article, we assume that the CIA may have been the cause of the crack epidemic and are responsible for transporting these drugs to Black neighborhoods. According to Professor McCoy, the CIA may be involved in drug trafficking through 3 methods. Quote unquote, number 1, coincidental complicity by allying with groups actively engaged in the drug traffic. Number 2, abetting the traffic by covering up for known heroin traffickers and condoning their involvement. And number 3, active engagement in the transport of opium and heroin. Still, to prevent communism from taking over the world, the CIA has been using criminal syndicates to fight back against communist parties. There was a classified letter that was sent from Oliver North to Felix Rodriguez, which, by the way, are both CIA operatives, about transporting aircrafts to Rodriguez in El Salvador. They would transport aircraft and weapons to contract groups to fight back against the communists. Ultimately, this results in these crime syndicates utilizing these supplies to sell drugs around the world and gain power from it. Frederick Hitz, a former CIA Inspector General, claims that the CIA was not involved in the drug trafficking and admits they were negligent to the drug trafficking occurring in crime organizations while fighting against communism. He also admits that the U.S. government was negligent to the drug trafficking happening in those contract groups. However, they knew the type of people they were working with, and yet they didn't supervise them attentively before it was too late. Due to the lack of control from the supervisors, there were no regulations about the drug allegations and no reports of criminal activity within. Therefore, there was no proof that the CIA was engaged in drug trafficking. However, they admit that they were negligent in allowing those organizations to exert influence over the drug trade.
Webb claimed to not have strong evidence to prove that crack cocaine and the CIA were connected to gain profit. In October 1998, the CIA made declassified reports public. The reports said the CIA was not part of the inner-city cocaine trade. The claims were disproved that CIA officials even knew that the Nicaraguans were dealing drugs. Although all these statements are true, after all, Webb did commit suicide but was found with 2 bullet wounds. As Exia mentioned earlier, it is unlikely to find someone who commits suicide with 2 bullet wounds. I believe that Webb knew something valuable that could have ruined the CIA's reputation. In conclusion, my belief is this conspiracy holds truth and that the CIA created disinformation to cause confusion and turmoil and to avoid being blamed for having a part in the crack epidemic.
David, I definitely agree with what you said, that there was a lot of disinformation that was going around regarding the CIA and the crack epidemic. I also think that it's unlikely that someone can shoot themselves twice in the head. So what Axia was saying, Axia's research on this conspiracy theory really opened my eyes to something else that could have happened to Webb, and something else that could have been happening in the world, really. I don't know if they did or if they didn't. I don't know if they did or if they didn't, based on our research, because it's just about CIA files and unsupported claims. But in my opinion, I think that they definitely had some sort of involvement in this conspiracy theory.
After hearing all this evidence, I came to a clear conclusion. There was a cover-up. The CIA knew about drug trafficking, protected narcos who financed their group about Contra, and they cracked and destroyed entire community. That has already been provided, but I also agree with Serena. There are misinformation about classification file about Contra and uninvestigated data of Gary Webb death.
I also have to agree with the CIA causing the crack epidemic because, like I've said, they were not involved in any way about the drug trafficking, but they choose to associate those groups. Associating with criminal organization is not only stupid, but dangerous as well, and causes a huge liability to the CIA itself. As a result, they disregard the lives of Black neighborhoods in America and giving power to criminal organizations around Central America as well as around the world.
Good.
Thank you so much for listening to our podcast. It's been Serena, Izzy, Aixa, and Chloe.